Hi everyone, I'm James, I'm 24 and I'm from Mayo. I was lucky enough to grow up in a loving family with hard-working parents who brought myself and my two sisters to Mass every Sunday. So from my earliest days, I knew that Sunday could not be a Sunday without going to Mass. The faith that my parents passed on to me to always believe in God, and this belief was confirmed in a simple way. For example, sport was a huge part of my childhood, and whenever I used to pray for an opportunity to score, an opportunity would usually appear, and it was always a sign that God existed and that He was there to support me. This belief ultimately lay in the fact that I was encouraged to have a relationship with God by my parents, and that whenever difficult circumstances arose in which I had no control over the outcome, my prayers to God always provided me with a sense of peace, that ultimately everything would work out. This was exemplified when myself and my sisters were informed that a family friend gave birth to a child who unfortunately was born with complications. In that moment, all we could do was pray that God would unburden their pain. I was aware of the devout faith of my grandparents. In particular, I would like to mention that I was always inspired by the work ethic and stoicism of my paternal grandmother, who was a woman of great faith. I was also greatly influenced by the devout faith of my maternal grandmother, who campaigned so steadfastly to educate people about the right to life of the unborn child. Indeed, one of the great developments of my relationship with God was the fundraising that I did for the pro-life campaign during my childhood, because before this, I had become so accustomed to being in environments where my faith was accepted. However, being involved in the pro-life campaign, it made me realize that not everyone was prepared to accept the teachings of the Church on core moral issues. Therefore, from an early age, I became aware that in order to be a Catholic, I would have to be able to defend the teachings of the Church at the appropriate moments and propose the truth. I was fortunate enough to go to a national school in which faith played an integral role. I recall spending weeks preparing for communion and confirmation. These were vital developments in my relationship with God, as it meant that when I was receiving my first Holy Communion, I knew that Jesus was present in the Eucharist, and on the occasion of a confirmation, I was mindful of the fact that I was receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit. My understanding of receiving Jesus in the Eucharist was greatly enhanced by the fact that unfortunately I was suffering from a stomach bug on the day of my first Holy Communion. By virtue of the fact that I could not enjoy the party and the razzmatazz associated with the day, this allowed me to think more deeply as to what the real significance of the day was truly about. I still look back on these times with great fondness, and I regard them as being instrumental in me having the faith that I have today. Faith in God remained unwavering for me during my secondary school years. I continued to go to weekly Mass and believe in the teachings of the Church, even though the social mores of society were changing at a remarkable pace. It was during this time that I was able to explore what my faith teaches when it came to a number of topics that were being debated at the time. However, it also became apparent at this time that I was living at an age when Christian message did not resonate with the public in the same way as it had in the past. Yet I did not allow myself to become disheartened, and that in the end I knew the truth would prevail. Yet it was in college that my faith in God changed in a reversal manner. I started at the University of Galway in September 2018, where I studied law. Initially, I did not join the Catholic Society. However, one day when I was in the chapel, the chaplain approached me and told me about a U2000 prayer meeting that took place on a weekly basis. I eventually mustered up the courage to attend, and despite the fact that I was apprehensive at first, within a short while I felt so comfortable and at ease in the company of the fellow attendees. I quickly became friends with those who attended the prayer meeting, and it was refreshing to finally have friends who saw the world as similar to myself. Even though I had been lucky to have had great friends in my life already, it was wonderful to have friends who placed Jesus as the main priority in their lives and who wanted to win as many souls for God as they possibly could. From the beginning of my time in Galway, I regarded my friends as being a gift from God. I was no longer afraid to express my belief in God, and they provided me with the support that I knew would last. It was during this time that I was able to see myself as not needing to wear a mask with regard to my faith. The friend group that I became part of remains to this very day, And it was during this time that my relationship with God also changed. As when I found friends in the faith, I also got to know God as a friend. This was a vital time in my relationship with God. The impact that I had was that I grew in confidence in myself and in faith. What was more was I realized that so many people did not really know who God really was. And with this evolution in my relationship with God, a desire stirred in my heart to tell others about what God was really like, about the impact that he can have in our lives. In March of 2019, I attended my first U2000 retreat in Oranmore, County Galway. I will never forget attending Mass with the vast majority of participants who were under the age of 35 and who loved Jesus. It was amazing to hear the powerful testimonies that how God can work in our lives. The sense of jubilation that I felt at this time made me realize that God is truly for everyone and that people's hearts can be changed if we allow God to be alive in us. I will never forget the joy that the young people had at the U2000 retreat. They had a freedom that I did not think was possible this side of eternity. They made me realize that we don't just encounter God at our last judgment, but we can have a relationship with God on a daily basis that can change our lives for the better. In 2020, the COVID pandemic struck, and unfortunately this meant that the fellowship I had built up the previous year had become remote in nature. However, prior to the pandemic striking, with the exception of calling into the college chapel during the day, I knew that my prayer life was something that I needed to develop in order to have a closer relationship with God. For example, I would have regarded pre-COVID that spending 15 minutes to say the rosary would have been too much. So therefore, in Lent of 2021, I decided to take up saying the rosary on a daily basis. Initially, I planned to revert to my usual habits once Lent had finished, yet within a few days, I began to realize that there was something missing from my life that I did not see when I said the rosary. Without saying the rosary, I noticed that I did not have the same level of peace that I had become used to during the Lent of 2021. This led me to saying the rosary every day, and this gives me an opportunity to reflect on the high points and the low points of my day, and therefore hand it over to God, knowing that he will take care of it. The silence of the lockdowns also brought me into a deeper relationship with God. The lockdowns were a time of great isolation, and at times it appeared as though there was no end in sight. However, it was during this time that I realized that my faith is fundamentally about relationship with God, and that God remains ever present, even if the exterior circumstances in our lives appear uncertain. Also, in August of 2020, U2000 decided that they would have a virtual summer festival. The degree to which I missed the in-person festival inspired me to become a volunteer with U2000 when the restrictions were lifted. Becoming a volunteer with U2000 has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. I love to volunteer with U2000, and in many ways it is a token of appreciation for all the organisation has done for me. I have never lost sight of the fact that if it was not for the volunteers, the U2000 events that I attended during my college days would never have been possible. Indeed, one of the main motivations behind me becoming a volunteer was that I wanted U2000 to have the same impact on others as it had on me. It is a great honour to be part of an organisation that allows young people to have a meaningful encounter with Christ and creates a path for them to walk with the Lord. When I graduated from college, I spent a year working in Dublin, and I found it remarkable to witness how many different spiritualities were within the ambit of Catholicism. From attending Latin Mass to charismatic prayer groups, it was amazing to see how one can celebrate being a Catholic in different ways depending on their spirituality. It was also during this time that I became part of the committee of Evangelium. Evangelium provides young people with the opportunity to get a deeper knowledge of the Catholic faith and therefore be part of the great evangelization. It was an honour to be part of this Youth Apologetics Conference, and it has been incredible to see so many young people gain a better understanding of their faith so that they can pass it on to others. Whilst I was in Dublin, I came across a prayer group called the Pure in Heart. Pure in Heart became like a home for me in Dublin. I quickly came to love the message of Pure in Heart as it invites young people to purity by proposing the Church's teaching on sexuality in a way that is attractive to young people. It became apparent to me that the message of Pure in Heart was something that so many people are searching for, and one that is ultimately written on the hearts of everyone. The prayer meeting in Pure in Heart included rosary, mass, adoration, talk and a social. I felt so lucky to have found a place and friends where my faith continued to flourish. I also went to the World Youth Day in Lisbon in 2023 with Pure in Heart. It was incredible to be part of an event where 1.5 million people gathered for an encounter with the Pope. It was a phenomenal event to be part of, and the sense of hope was palpable. Attending World Youth Day helped show me that the Catholic faith is universal and that God is for everyone. We arrived home from World Youth Day in the early hours, and just over 12 hours later, I was at Clongowes Wood to be a volunteer for the U2000 Summer Festival. And even though, like many volunteers, I had to combat tiredness, it was during this time that I began to see myself as a servant of God. It was around this time also that I felt a desire in my heart to be part of something that introduced God to others who did not know Him. And whilst I was delighted to be a volunteer at events like U2000, I realised I needed formation in the faith in order to be able to bring God to others. I came across Holy Family Mission at a U2000. Yet before I knew exactly what Holy Family Mission represented, it was the past community members that impressed me most about the organisation. The past community members had a joy that was contagious, and it was remarkable to see how they could spend a year or two at Holy Family Mission and then go on to achieve greater and better things. This inspired me to look into Holy Family Mission and consider what I could gain out of being part of the community for the year. The more I researched into Holy Family Mission, the more I felt that the Lord was calling me to apply to join. So I filled out the application form and had an interview, and I was subsequently offered a place. However, it was when I was offered a place that dawned on me the sacrifice that I would have to make in order to spend a year with Holy Family Mission. At this particular juncture of my life, it would have been easier for me to continue pursuing a career. And in addition, I would always have regarded myself as being a home bird. So all of a sudden, being away from home for a number of weeks at a time seemed daunting. For a few days, I was torn as to whether I should accept a place or not. Originally, I planned to make a decision on Friday, the 6th of October. However, that evening I just became so busy with other chores that the time did not allow me to make a decision. So eventually I emailed Holy Family Mission at the Evangelion Conference down in Cork to say that I would decline the offer. And the bizarre aspect of this was that as I was sending the email, the community of Holy Family Mission was on the other side of the wall. Whilst it was a difficult decision to make, I knew I had to make a decision. However, at lunchtime I was talking to Father Patrick, and I explained to him that regrettably I would not be joining Holy Family Mission. And whilst Father Patrick accepted my decision, he did advise me that if it was on my heart to do Holy Family Mission, it would be a shame to miss out on the opportunity when it was there. So I decided to rethink my decision, but once again I was torn by what I had to make. So coincidentally, Father Patrick was speaking at the conference after lunch, and it could be deemed providential that one of the main talking points of his speech was the parable from Matthew chapter 21, in which two sons are asked to work in the vineyard, and one says no before later regretting it, and subsequently elects to serve. And the other son said he would work in the vineyard, but did not go. So needless to say, I felt a great sense of affinity with the first son. Following the conference, I had a phone call with HFM on Monday morning to revisit the possibility of joining the community. After a couple of hours of deliberation, I decided to accept my place. Bizarrely, in making my decision, I began to ask myself, did I believe in God or not? And if so, did I believe that God had people on earth who were to serve Him? I felt that if the core team were happy enough to offer me a place, it was the ultimate sign from God that I was supposed to join HFM. In the end, I knew that if I did not join Holy Family Mission, I would have regretted it, no matter what the rest of my life had in store. Since then, it has been a great privilege to be part of the community that means the world to me. Being part of Holy Family Mission has brought me into an even deeper, closer relationship with God. I may realise that as Psalm 62 says, "For God alone my soul awaits in silence, from Him comes my salvation." I've also immensely enjoyed being on mission with some of the most inspirational people that I have ever met. Being on mission has affirmed to me what God can do in our lives when He's given an opportunity. For example, I will never forget the retreat that we did in the school just a few weeks ago. And due to the size of the class, we had to split the group in half. So one group went to adoration and had confessions in the church, whilst the other group waited in the hall. The first group that were in the hall were restless, and it was difficult to get them to settle. However, when it was time to swap, the two groups crossed paths, and it was simply amazing to see the harmony of the group that had just encountered the Lord. This was a phenomenal moment for me, because it was an illustration of the impact that God can have in our lives when we open our hearts to Him. Thank you for listening to my testimony, and be assured of our prayers here at Holy Family Mission.